Greetings and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to What Brings You In today. My name is Bradley Wink, and I am an aspiring mental health counselor here to promote mental health awareness, discuss mental health topics, and spread some positive energy. If this is your first time joining us, thank you so much for being here today. I hope there is something in this podcast for you to take away and graciously impact your day to day. If you are a returning listener, thank you so much for tuning in again to this brand new episode, The Road to Sobriety. As always, before we get started, the views, information, or opinions expressed in this podcast are solely the views of the individuals involved and by no means represent absolute facts. Opinions expressed by the host and guest can change at any time. This podcast may cover sensitive topics, and we ask you refrain from listening if you are likely to be offended or adversely impacted by any of these topics. Neither the company, the producer, the host, nor the guest shall at any time be liable for the content covered, causing offense, distress, or any other reaction. I am not a licensed mental health counselor, and this podcast should not be used as a substitute for actual mental health support. Today, we're going to be talking about mental health and alcohol. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the road to sobriety, what causes alcoholism, and ways for individuals to stay on track and motivated when they're working to achieve a sober lifestyle. I'm joined here today by my very good friend and confidant, Christina Baker, who also happens to be the owner of Collab Studios here in Clearwater, Florida. Christina is an incredible human, wife, friend, businesswoman, and as of recent, someone who has adopted a sober lifestyle. So thank you so much for joining me, Christina.
Oh my goodness, that was quite the introduction.
Well,
Thank you.
duly noted. I mean, as it should.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I was thinking about this the first time I met you, just to speak to your personality and who you are. I have just moved to Dunedin from Tampa, and I had a whole new social circle of people that I was being introduced to. And I remember going over to your house, and you were a gracious host, and you brought me in, and you had that philosophy of our house is your house. You know, don't feel like you need to ask for anything. And I just think that speaks volumes. And those kind of people are the best people.
Absolutely.
So I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And what we're discussing today is really, it's a tough subject. I mean, alcohol and mental health, they go very hand in hand.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of connections between the two of them. So one of the first things to consider when it comes to drinking and mental health is the stigma that surrounds the topic. You know, we live in a society where drinking is not only accepted, but it's glorified. We drink when we're happy. We drink when we're sad. We drink to celebrate milestones and accomplishments. We drink for holidays. We drink for celebrations. And a lot of us drink simply because we're bored.
Right.
You know, there's always a reason to drink, essentially, is what it gets to.
And we tend to intertwine drinking with every new activity as well.
Exactly. There's always something. And I don't know if it's just a Florida thing, but I feel like everywhere you go, there's always a reason to kind of center alcohol around whatever you're doing. And, you know, I feel like if you told someone, you know, you were going to quit nicotine, people would be like, oh, good for you. You know, you've got this. You're so strong. And you say, you know, I'm going to quit alcohol. And people are like, well, why?
They're like, why? Or they're like, you mean just for a little bit? Or like giving it up, you know, I gave it up for Lent one time.
Yeah,
and
that's exactly it.
Or are you going to do gummies? Or like, what are you going to do?
Like, what's your alternative? There has to be something to make up that void.
Yes, correct.
And that's exactly what I like to get into when we talk about alcohol, especially in the psych field. You know, there's a complex reinforcing nature within our individual motivation styles where we condition ourselves with alcohol as the catalyst to our solution. So if we think about that, you know, think for instance, you know, we've all been there where the kids are running around crazy, you know, the plumber can't get there till tomorrow, your partner comes in, they're driving you nuts, they're getting on your nerves. So we open a bottle of wine, you know, and all of a sudden it makes our day at least a little bit better. Doesn't get rid of the solutions. And I know my experiences working in hospitality, I mean, when we have those days where we're having those guests who are just obnoxious and awful, the end of the day rolls around and, you know, it's like, oh, you want to go grab a beer? Oh, absolutely. Even though we're already mentally fatigued, we're physically exhausted, we still partake in that. That's still where we're going to go. This becomes even more dynamic because not only is alcohol kind of the center point, but it's also extremely convenient. There is, you know, most restaurants have a liquor license. Grocery stores, they're always a place. Even convenience stores have a wine or a beer section. Alcohol is heavily advertised on top of all of these components. And ironically, when I was doing this podcast, when I was coming up with the layout, the research, there was a little advertisement for beer while I was looking up statistics and facts
Yeah.
about alcohol.
Yeah.
So it's always kind of around us.
Yeah.
And even I kind of went back too in my thought process for this. I'm a 90s baby. So the American Pie era was huge. It was alcohol is in films. It's in everyday culture that we go through, even music. That's another really big one. So you just see how all of these components, because you can go from popping bottles in the club to being as smooth as Tennessee whiskey, and that's where that glorification kind of comes into play. And what we might not understand is the psychology behind it is huge on the fact that it really impacts your mind. And it's one of those things, we are always dealing with this in psychology. We can't physically see something the way that you would if you were in a medical or if you were in the medical field. If you were looking at a biopsy or if you were looking at something under a microscope, it's much more difficult to see something when it's impacting your mind. Alcohol is a depressant, which means it slows down the activity in the brain. And ironically, that's what a lot of us are drawn to when it comes to consuming alcohol, because it takes that kind of chaotic parts of our lives and it slows it down.
Right.
And beyond that, we also know there are the dopamine aspects of it. So the dopamine is going to be what kind of facilitates our pleasure and our satisfaction. So by mentioning this information, I'm not condoning the use of alcohol, because in fact, I'm an alcohol user and currently I work as a bartender. So I depend on the sales of alcohol for my lifestyle, my livelihood. So what I am saying is, in an effort to reduce the stigma around alcoholism, around alcohol abuse, is to understand how quickly this can happen to somebody and to encourage the compassion for yourself and for others who may be struggling with an addiction or even just with the abuse of it. If a friend or a family member comes to you and they're telling you that they're choosing to abstain from alcohol consumption, whether it's for good, for a month, for a week, for a day, it's not easy to kick this habit. It is extremely difficult.
Right.
So give them the respect that they had to give themselves to have that self-awareness. It's really, really important. And that kind of brings us into you and your story. And I'm really interested to hear what your experience has been like with all of this.
Yeah, so I'll start way back. I started drinking fairly young as a teenager. I think because mostly I had undiagnosed anxiety as a kid.
Yeah.
And I had stomach aches all the time. Every day it was a fight to go to school.
Yeah.
And I would go to school, and then I would complain of a stomach ache, and I would go to the school nurse, and they would send me home, and then I got dubbed that my name was Faker Baker, because they thought I was faking everything.
Right.
Because I never had a fever, and
Gotcha.
other than stomach aches, I was a very healthy, active child.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I get into high school, and I'm exposed to alcohol because my parents did not drink in our home growing up. And I found beer, oddly enough. And for the first time, I felt relaxed. And I felt okay.
Right.
And I was like, oh yes, this is for me. It's my new medicine.
That's what's gonna work.
Right. And it I'll say it quote worked for a while for me. And then my parents found out, and they were, of course, very concerned, because even at that point, I was taking things way too far. I was not drinking a beer to chill out. I was, drinking 6 or 8 beers as a probably 100-pound, 16-year-old.
Right, absolutely.
So we had an intervention, and I had to go to AA. I went to 2 AA meetings a day as a teenager.
Wow. Do you remember how old you were?
Yeah, I was like 16.
16. Wow.
Yeah. So
that's powerful. That kind of puts you in a place where you're really. How did you respond to that?
I was not taking it seriously.
Okay.
My focus was on getting a car, and my parents said, if you stay sober for 6 months, we'll get you a car. And so I stayed.
Motivating,
they got a breathalyzer.
Wow.
Used it on me once. and I never saw it again, and I was back drinking within a month, but I was a little more careful this time with
Right.
it, and so I got my car in 6 months and
Yeah. Yeah.
did the things that teenagers do, and they lie, and
Yeah. All the
so
above.
to get what they want, right?
Right.
So then I got married very young. I was married at 20, and my ex-husband didn't. He was not a big drinker.
Okay.
So, but I really liked him a lot, and I was like, I am not going to screw this up.
Yeah.
And so I tamed myself for a while, and then I got pregnant and did not drink the whole pregnancy, and then nursed him, and then I had another kid, and then
Right.
nursed him
Right.
almost for a full year. So there was, a few years in there that I went alcohol free.
Right. You had those breaks.
Yeah, yeah. And then I went through a pretty major life change of figuring out that I was gay, and that was pretty difficult because my family was not supportive.
Right.
So alcohol re-entered.
Yeah. And it went back, ironically, to your original.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons why I called this podcast What Brings You In Today, because there's always what we call the underlining reason.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting how it was the same coping mechanism that you had when you were a teen.
Yeah.
And now it's coming reintroduced after a major life event. This
Correct.
is something that happens quite frequently.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that we displace it in our mind as something, it's not really, it's just, this is how I'm getting by. This is how I'm getting by. And it's, again, it's one of those things, kind of like you said, you're not just having one or two beers. You're having 8, 9 to completely numb, to completely forget. Yeah. And it's that correlation that's strong. And
for sure.
The fact that you're aware of it is even stronger, though. And that's something I wanted to just touch on while you were going there. Not to cut you off from your story, but it brings it back to that full circle moment of, that's what we use it for.
Right.
That was your medicine then, and it became your medicine later on down the road.
Yeah.
And so from there, sorry to cut you off.
No,
It's
not
just
at
a good
all.
point
That was
to
great.
bring up.
That was great information. So from there, my life kind of fell apart for a few years while I was trying to figure out my sexuality and the guilt and shame tied to that because I was raised Southern Baptist, and that was not
Yeah.
I could have murdered 50 people and be welcomed home when I apologized, but being gay, living in that quote sin was just not acceptable, and I still fully believed in that religion at that time.
That's a huge struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of back and forth going on in that mind there.
Yeah. I mean, I just could not reconcile. I was at complete war with myself.
Right.
And it was really, it was a life or death quote decision for me because I hated myself. I was at such war with myself because of the way that I was created. But if I, made this choice, in my mind, I'm breaking up my family, and I'm disappointing my parents, and I'm gonna go to hell most likely, and so all of that stuff. So I'm grappling with that, and I finally was able to come to peace with that, and that's a whole different episode.
Wanted to ask what transpired that, but no, I understand.
It was a long transition for me. It was a lot of digging really deep into theology and how the Bible was formed. Like I'm putting my everything into this book.
Right.
So where did that book come from? It certainly didn't drop out of the sky. So I went back and dug really deep into that, and what I found gave me peace.
Wow.
And I was able to make peace with my God, my higher power, my creator, whatever you want to, say that. And I still don't feel like I fully have the right word for that. I believe that there's something out there, but I'm not, So once I made peace with that, nothing else really mattered, but I hadn't resolved all my junk from before.
Right.
So the drinking continued, and now keep in mind, I'm not completely out of control. I'm keeping my stuff together for the most part.
Yeah. And
I'm
that's a
yeah.
great topic to bring up because
Yes.
it's definitely one of those things where there are different forms of alcohol abuse, and
Right.
there's a difference between, like I said, having a few too many cocktails the night before versus waking up and immediately going for a bottle because that's what brings you comfort.
Mhm.
And a lot of times when people kind of struggle with that in between of when do I exactly have a problem or when should I kind of go into this a little bit more, I always think of going back to cultural
Mhm.
part of this, but there was, if you're familiar with Desperate Housewives, the show,
Yeah.
there was Brie Vandekamp who struggled with alcoholism, and she, if you don't remember, she portrayed the perfect, pristine housewife. She
Mm.
was the perfection projection, if you
Mhm.
will. So when she started to struggle, she was hiding it, but she wasn't fully aware of it. So it wasn't until Lynette went and found all of her bottles in her trash and laid them
Yeah.
out for her the next morning that she had this kind of awakening of, oh wow, this is something.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, and especially kind of with what you're describing, highly functioning is
Absolutely.
definitely
Yeah.
something, and more often than not, it happens
Yes.
within highly functioning individuals,
Right.
which is exactly what I would say you
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
project. I mean,
definitely.
you are
For
a
sure.
very driven individual.
Yeah.
You've had a lot of successes,
Mhm.
and pretty much, I would assume a lot of the ventures that you've
Mhm.
you've gone
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
So that does happen, and that's one of those things where the fine line really comes into play.
Yes.
It's subjective for everybody. The way that alcohol affects us, the way that it changes even the chemicals in our brain as it hits us, what's
Yeah.
going on with it, because it's the same way you and I probably wouldn't have the same hangover,
Right.
so the way that alcohol impacts you is going to be completely different. So it's really hard to kind of pinpoint, oh, it's exactly this, it's exactly that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the biggest takeaway is being, and I'm going to bring this back a million times in this podcast, but
Mhm.
it's always going back to self
Yeah.
awareness, um, no matter what, because in its simplest form, for people who aren't aware really of what that is, self awareness is the ability to focus on yourself. And it's how your thoughts, your actions, and your emotions do or do not align with what your internal standards are.
Yes.
So if you're telling yourself that voice inside your head saying, hey, maybe we've had a little bit too much tonight or this week, maybe I should take some time off, yet you don't follow your own
Correct.
standards of what you just said, well, then honestly, that kind of comes back around. And you're sitting in that place where you're like, wait a second, now I'm not even listening to myself.
Yeah.
So that might be a time where, hey, maybe this is something that really needs to be addressed. Because in that same way, too, when you do come to that moment of realizing it, it's not promoting you or categorizing you into a place where because you can't do it on your own, you're not good enough.
Mm.
And that's where a lot of us struggle with that because unfortunately, we associate asking for help with vulnerability,
Mhm.
weakness, and being less desirable.
Yeah.
And really, all it is, it's a way of saying, hey, this is hard. It's okay that it's hard. And I'm going to use some resources to get things back on track.
Yeah.
But we demoralize it to a point. And in my opinion, as a human and as a future mental health provider, I don't see it as weakness at all to ask for
No,
help.
not at all.
It's actually quite the opposite. It's bravery, and it's conditioning. Really, I
Yeah.
mean, you're really focusing on yourself because if you don't have yourself, what do you really have? I mean, you don't
Exactly.
have a lot of different avenues you can
Yeah.
take. So the fact that you got there, even
Yeah.
as somebody who I would I don't want to categorize, but I would
Sure.
put you in that
Yeah.
that level of
Yeah.
no highly functioning. So yeah, you still
Definitely.
get your shit done.
Yeah. Right.
You make sure that you're
Yeah. Kids are taken care
yeah,
of, bills are
all of it.
paid, and looking good,
Right.
and
Right.
like exercising, working out,
Right.
pretty fit,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But yeah, I'm sure my liver wasn't
Right.
wasn't
If
so
we could go
fit.
back and have like a, one of those
Yeah,
like a
the blood
full
work.
X-ray,
Yeah,
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 just
yeah.
see everything, yeah, it probably wouldn't be
Right.
where you'd want it to be.
Yeah.
So when did you come to this real, I want to call it the real realization?
Yeah.
Like,
So I think I have always known this entire time that I really shouldn't be doing this.
mhm,
My grandmother died of alcoholism,
gotcha.
and for that reason, my mom didn't drink at all, and my dad
Right.
didn't drink. And so there was that aspect of genetics.
Mhm.
Then it was my uh, behaviors in high school
Yeah.
and things, and I learned a lot going to those AA meetings. I
Right.
knew better,
Right.
um, but I think at the end. it really just came down to a almost a habit
Mm-hmm.
more than an addiction. Like we
Right.
first, now I'm not saying that I'm not addicted because clearly
Yeah.
was, but like we were talking about in the beginning, my wife and I, we had wrapped every single thing that we do
Yeah.
around alcohol.
Right.
We had told ourselves that this is how we connect at night after
Right.
work,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
We go, we have a nice dinner, we have a nice glass of wine,
Yes.
and we just blabber all night and we're, quote, connecting.
Right.
But can we remember the next day what we
Right.
connected on?
Exactly.
No, we weren't.
Right.
Like you said, we enjoy entertaining.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And, I started thinking about all of those people that, we have in and out of our home. And did we really connect?
Right.
No.
Right.
We were drinking.
We were
With
numbing.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
The couple times you were
Oh,
over,
absolutely.
we didn't get to know each other on a
Right.
deeper level.
That's very true.
We were drinking.
Yeah. And you almost go into that where you almost follow emotion. If you really think about it, like, especially if you had, consider like a party where you don't know very many people,
Yeah.
you kind of facilitate quickly to,
Uh-huh.
where's the alcohol, because we
Yes.
might have this internal struggle of
Right.
being able to connect to people, or we
Yeah.
might be uncomfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I know that's what I do when I'm in a
Sure.
situation. I'll go over there and, maybe 1 or 2 glasses of wine.
Yeah.
Oh, now I can talk to people.
Right.
But to be
Yeah.
completely honest, I mean, if I go back between you and I to that first party at your home,
Yeah.
I don't know if I could say I could remember exactly who I met. I definitely
Right.
couldn't tell you their names,
Yeah.
or I maybe could picture their faces,
Yeah.
maybe, maybe something that happened,
Yeah.
but not anything like you said that is on that connection level.
Yeah.
So
So all of that was going on. And then the other thing that I really started to notice in the last year or two was honestly my brain function
wow,
and like the fog that
yeah,
was over me and simple tasks that I used to be able to just crank out. I was noticing like, oh my gosh, I'm having to like mentally walk myself and talk myself through
Mhm.
this because my brain is not keeping up.
right,
What in the hell is
is
going
going on, yeah,
And so I was praying that it wasn't old age, but so, and I was fairly convinced that, hey, maybe alcohol is
right,
playing a role in this.
hmm
So I think it had been maybe a year or two that I said to myself, all right, I'm going to not drink hard liquor anymore.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
okay,
So that was my first,
that
I'm
was
going
your
to put
first
that
step,
aside.
right?
I'm a big time beer drinker. So that
Mhm.
was not, I still have my beer.
Yeah, that wasn't gonna go
No.
away.
But then again, it came back to that mental stuff, and I would just get frustrated at work.
Gotcha.
It
Gotcha.
didn't really matter so much anywhere else, but I would get so frustrated at work when I couldn't remember things or I forgot to do something, and that was it. I got pissed.
Right.
I was pissed
Right.
at myself.
Well, there's that drivenness
Yeah.
that's coming
Yeah.
out, and it's stopping you from being driven.
Yeah.
Well, what's happening?
Yeah.
What's the hurdle? What's
Yeah.
keeping me from staying on track?
Mhm.
And you found the answer.
So that was it. And I
Right.
literally was like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told my wife, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And that was also a big step because she was drinking just as much, if not more,
Right.
than I was.
Right.
And an element, I was afraid for her drinking too.
Right.
And I knew that if I didn't make a move, she wasn't going to make a move.
Yeah, for sure.
Either. And she's
Right.
got it in her family.
Mhm.
Alcohol. I mean, her brother just passed away a year ago, almost to the date, at I think he was 43.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of alcoholism.
Right.
So her dad passed away from it. So I mean, neither one of us have really any business messing with it.
Right.
And I think we were, rolling the dice and took our chances for way too long. So
Right.
she quit a week after I did.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like 5 weeks in at this moment,
Mm-hmm.
and it was relatively easy the first 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
We actually did go to a couple AA meetings.
Okay.
Wasn't a good fit for us, but
Right.
I like the 12 steps. I'm not a big fan of the meetings.
Okay.
Um, so
Well,
we kind of did our own stuff.
well,
Yeah.
I want to make a note of that too,
Yeah.
because it is important that, a lot of people think too, especially whether it's mental health in general or like with what your specific struggle would be.
Hmm.
If you go to a meeting or if you go to a counselor and the fit is not right,
Yeah.
it's the same thing as a doctor. You
Right.
might go to a doctor and not like the way that they're doing things or their procedures or even if it's their attitude.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to find that fit that works for you. That is very
Yes.
important.
Yeah.
And
And
also
keep looking.
yeah, you don't give up just because
Mhm.
the first or the second one didn't work out. You always you're fighting for yourself essentially. The same way, I mean, if you were going into a lawyer's office, you
Sure.
really want them to represent you the best way that
Absolutely.
they possibly can. So that's just an important note. I'm proud of you for doing that. I'm also proud
Definitely.
of you for your sobriety as well as for your wife. Just as a heads up, I
Thank you.
wanted to throw that in there because I know
Thank
it's
you.
not easy.
Yeah.
And I just that's such a good point. That's such a good thing to bring
Mm.
up. And just to anybody who's listening who's like, oh, I've gone to AA before, it wasn't my thing. Well, try going to another one or get what you need from it.
Yeah.
If you don't, or if you do like the 12-step program
Yeah.
aspect of it
Yeah.
better,
You can
then
totally work on that.
you can do
Yeah.
those,
Yeah.
and you can get the support in other ways too.
Correct. And I'll tell you, we completely changed our social media feeds.
Smart.
And
Smart.
so everything that we saw, every podcast that we listened to,
Mhm.
everything is sobriety related.
Gotcha.
So that was a big thing for both of us
Mhm.
to get that support. We both got the I Am Sober app.
Yep.
And it tracks
Tracking.
everything.
Smart.
dollars, calories,
Oh, wow.
time. It
Wow.
gives you, you check in, twice a day. It just takes a couple seconds, and
Mhm.
you can personalize it, and you can see those reasons why you set it up in the beginning. Why are you wanting to be sober?
Right.
You write down all
And
of
it
your
reminds
reasons.
you
It
when
reminds
you
you.
need
You
it.
look at those. You can add to that.
Smart.
So I don't own the I Am Sober app. I just really
Just a really big fan. Yeah, it works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely working for us. But after, so the 2 weeks was like no problem,
Mhm.
and then that fog
Yeah.
lifted off
Gotcha.
of my brain,
Gotcha.
and I was quickly reminded why I drank. All of those feelings
Okay.
came to the surface.
Okay.
So I definitely had a couple tough days. And for
Right.
me, it wasn't like a craving. Like, I'm
Okay.
not like, oh gosh, I'm craving a drink. It wasn't
Mhm.
like that. It was, I'm craving to be numbed out.
Right.
I'm thinking too much. I'm feeling too much.
Right.
It's just too much.
And that's not what I want to deal with.
No, and I
Yeah.
haven't felt this way in literally
Because
close to 20 years. I'm going to
because the
go.
numbing continued.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just
It was
stacked
being
that numbing.
reinforced. So what did you do in that? Like, what kept you?
So literally, I started writing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great outlet.
Yeah. And I just like immersed myself in sobriety podcasts,
Okay.
and
Just diving deeper.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
You have to do something. It's good that you're writing too, because you're writing about the feelings. You're putting them out. There's a lot of power in putting what's in your mind on paper.
Yeah.
And it's always one of those things. You go into counseling, it's like, oh, do you journal? And like,
Right.
oh God, I'm not going to
Yeah.
journal. Like people are
Right.
never really a big fan of it.
Yeah.
I actually found for me, my thoughts work a lot quicker than what my hand can write. So
Yeah.
I just started typing on my computer.
I do the same.
When I first
Yeah.
started, and all of a sudden you'll be like, oh my God, that's a 10-page paper.
Exactly.
Like, how did I just do that?
Yeah.
And you do feel better.
Yeah.
And, especially with journaling too, especially with like alcohol abuse, you can go back and people don't realize that journaling, yes, it is writing, but it's also documenting.
It's a timeline. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can go back and you can see, oh my God,
Yeah.
look at that progress. Remember when I did feel that way and now I don't feel this way?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
then you can physically see
Yeah.
everything that you have done in between.
Yes.
And it should give you this prideful
Definitely.
moment and inspiration to
Yeah.
continue
Yeah.
your progress.
And I think one of the last things I want to say, speaking about my sobriety, very short journey, because I know I'm just getting started, is, prior to this, I had gone several pretty deep rounds of therapy
Mhm.
in my adult life.
Mhm.
And so I had the tools
Right.
already established.
Right.
And I think that's why it's been relatively easy for me to do this.
Gotcha.
Had this been, happen when I was 20 and had no therapy and had done no work on myself,
Mhm.
I can assure you it would not be this easy. And I
Right.
think that's one of the things that kind of turned me off about the AA meetings. Not that I am certainly not better than anyone in that room, but
Right.
I do feel like I had done more work.
Right. Exactly.
I had dug deeper. I know myself.
Right.
And I was not starting, from scratch.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think for me, I just kept feeding myself the lie of this is a part of my personality.
Right.
This is, I'm a beer drinker and,
Right.
and I'm a drinker and I
Right.
drink and I'm fun. And,
That's a good point. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you think about, I mean, it becomes exactly part
Yeah.
of your person. It becomes one of those things that's, oh yeah, well, I'm the craft beer drinker. I hang out
Yes.
at the breweries.
Right.
I mean, it's such a
Yeah.
big part of culture. I mean,
Yeah.
essentially, and that will get into a whole nother. There will be
Yeah.
an episode, I'm hoping, at some point on
Great.
social media, just
Yeah.
because you can go into how not only are you projecting it there, but then you're projecting it into what you're posting.
Yes,
And
correct.
what you're sharing, that part of
Yes.
yourself with people. And so you're taking that away from you.
Yeah.
Essentially. So that's
Yeah.
another one of the struggles that comes up.
Yeah. So I
And-
think when I stopped selling myself on that lie, I think that was a major turning point for
Right.
me.
Absolutely.
I can change that story.
You redefined Christina.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can reframe me. I can
Mhm.
say, no, I'm sober. I'm clear. This
Right.
is, who I need
Right.
to be. I'm trying to build this business of the collab to bring people together and cultivate relationships.
Right.
How can I do that when I'm in a fog?
Right.
I
Yeah.
cannot.
You're just not,
I
not gonna
cannot.
be able
I'm
to do
not
it.
my best self.
So what has the best part been about, I mean, I
Oh,
know it's
man.
probably online with that, but when did you just have that moment of like, wow, I know you said it was the 2-week mark, the fog came up, but
yeah, I think just feeling good physically,
Mhm.
being able to connect with people now
Mhm.
and remember conversations is huge to me. I am a
Right.
natural cultivator.
Yeah.
And, the frustration that came with not being able to remember, if you came to me and were like, hey, my sister's sick or something's
Right,
going on, and I
right.
didn't remember that, and
Right.
you were like, hey, thanks for checking in on me.
Yeah,
I
right,
mean,
right,
like,
yeah,
things
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
I need to be able to do that.
Yeah.
That's who I am.
That's awesome.
Alcohol is not who I am.
right, exactly.
So, yeah.
That's profound. I mean, that's all. I'm so happy that you have
Thank you.
that moment. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's huge. And you bring up so many awesome points that we're discussing with this, because with one, just working for what works for you,
Yeah.
redefining yourself is
Yes.
extremely powerful.
Yeah.
And knowing that there is support. There is support
Absolutely.
everywhere. I mean, I know you said your wife is doing this with you too,
Yeah.
so that's a great, I mean,
Huge.
has that helped
Oh
your
my
guys'
gosh.
relationship? I mean, I'm
Yes.
assuming it's just
Yeah.
because you do think about it, because when you had said that, it brought something up where it was, if you begin your relationship with alcohol
Yes.
and then you take alcohol away,
Right.
sometimes, I mean,
Sure.
I'm not gonna lie, I went on a
Yeah.
date and I was like, I don't know if he remembers a lot of like what we just
Yes.
discussed. Like,
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
I don't know if he did,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things, especially when you carry it on into a long-term relationship and
Right.
marriage. So what have you noticed with that?
Yeah, so definitely just deeper connection, and just a general happiness. I
Aw,
mean,
That's awesome.
we knew each other in middle school, and we were best friends then, and we just laughed,
Mhm,
until she
mhm.
was that friend for me. We just
Aw.
laughed and laughed and laughed. And so when we got together as adults, it was the same way. It was like we were two seventh graders again,
Yeah, yeah.
just goofy and laughing. And I think what has brought that, not having alcohol has brought
Right.
that back. Like sometimes I look
Wow.
at her and I see her smile, and I'm like,
Aw.
I have not seen that spark and that smile in
Right.
her. And we have not like joked and kidded like
Right.
we are now.
Right.
And yeah.
Right. And if you
so-
were having that, like you said, when you opened the bottle of wine, you wouldn't remember it the next day.
Exactly. We're
Right.
checking in on each other more. When she knows I've got a podcast or she's got a big sales meeting or something.
Yeah.
We're more in tune with that because we can remember.
Right. Exactly.
We're walking together more, and
Right.
just encouraging each other to work. Get our workouts in so we
Right.
can feel healthy. And
Right.
it's all. I cannot tell you one negative. I
Negative-
really cannot.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because with what you're saying, And I want to touch on this because this is interesting because you're both doing it together.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to pull her into it, but
Yeah.
I would imagine your journeys, even though you're doing it together, there's separate elements to it.
Definitely.
So do you find that you can bounce things off? I mean, can you support each other when you have differences that come along? I don't know if I'm wording that right.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean, but yes, we
So
can definitely.
so her road to sobriety is
Yeah.
different from yours.
Yeah.
So would you say that your struggles are different when you have
Yes.
those?
Yeah.
And
Yes, our struggles are very much differently. I think hers. I'll speak for her, and she can smack me around later. But
Sorry.
just kidding. She lost her brother almost a year to the day, like I said, and they were very close. And I watched, oddly enough, her alcohol consumption over the last year just exponentially.
Grief.
Yeah. And so I think hers is more out of, sadness and grief at this stage. Mine is just a general numbing, and I just want to have fun all the time.
Yeah.
That for me, I had equated fun for so long with alcohol that, so yeah, our journeys are very different.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a good thing to know. And it's bringing back that subjectivity that no matter who you are, if you're trying this, and again, this goes back to whether you're trying to maintain a sober lifestyle, whether you're just trying to cut back or cut out, it's going to be different for each and every person. And that is why the resources are important. That's why therapy is important.
Yes.
That's why the meetings are important, or the
Right.
12 steps are important.
Right.
There's always going to be some element of making it work for you.
Yeah.
This is not something that you can Google and just simply have some answers thrown at you. You might find resources, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
There are always outlets, especially online. But you're not going to get a generic, it's not like a recipe. You're not going to be able to do things exactly the way that it's called and expect the exact results.
It's not going to fit you. Yeah. You may pull a few nuggets out of there, certainly, but if you have not done work on yourself, you are not going to be successful unless you have somebody with you guiding.
Right. Right. So I know this is probably kind of a weird question, but we did bring it up. And can you have fun without alcohol?
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Yeah, because that's one of the things, and like we had talked right at the beginning, how, are you going to do gummies? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do, what's going to make up for what you're not doing?
Right, exactly. So one of the things that I was pretty adamant about in the beginning is getting all the firsts out of the way very early. Some people might wait on things that were big time, alcohol consumption events, but I was like, I'm jumping right in.
Right, there was no, I'm going to wait until Monday because it's this.
We're doing this. So we went to a concert.
Okay.
We got out on our jet ski, did the boating thing for the day.
Right.
We went camping, which is like drunk
always,
fest.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All of these things are alcohol induced.
So we did, we went out to dinners with friends again.
Okay.
Major drinking event.
Right.
Trying to think of other things that we did, but those are off the top of my head that
Right,
we
you're
just
first.
knocked out, and we were like, we're going to do this. And guess what? They were all really fun. And
and you still had a good time.
Yeah, we had a great time, and we woke up the next day, and our heads weren't hurting.
Right, and you could still talk about how much fun you had the day before.
Exactly.
So how have others responded to this?
I mean, everybody's been very positive. There's no doubt about it. We have not seen friends drop off.
Right.
I think,
and that's, if you do, there might be a reason for that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Really think about what a friend is supposed to be.
Yes.
Whether it's your couple friends or it's support. So if you're going through it and they can't get behind it,
Yeah, right. And everybody has been very respectful. Like the friends that we've gone out to dinner with, they know, and they're like, hey, do you mind if we have a drink? And we're like, thank you for asking. That was very thoughtful, but no, we don't care. We're fine,
Right. We're doing this for our own reasons.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with what you're doing, or, so that's
everybody
awesome.
has asked. I can't think of anybody. I mean, everybody's just been really great about it.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear that. And it is, that was one of the things, it's one of the tips for kind of staying on the sober lifestyle path is you might have to sever some relationships.
Right.
And a lot of times those might be part of your underlining issue too, of what is supporting this lifestyle, what doesn't work for this lifestyle. And I love how you've brought up that point of just remembering, experiencing life, but in a
Yes.
different way. It doesn't
Yes.
mean you're not going to get those experiences.
Correct.
It doesn't mean it's not, because I'm going back. I just recently celebrated my graduation.
Mm.
Went to Savannah, and I can
Oh
tell you,
yeah.
and again, it goes back to, it was a celebration, an accomplishment. I was with family,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't really remember a whole lot about it, because it was just wake up, mimosa,
Yeah.
lunch, beer, and then you go out for the night. And
Right.
that was just kind of part of, oh, because it's celebrating, it's okay to
Yes.
do this. But you do bring that up, and now I'm like, wow, that trip was really quick, and spent a lot of money.
Yeah.
Also, don't really remember that. So,
Yeah.
it's just all of
Yeah.
these things kind of come back together. So,
Yeah.
I really love that approach. And that's
Mm-hmm.
such a positive approach to put out to others, too,
Mm-hmm.
because you never know, and a lot of times we build up these situations in our head where we automatically assume what the event's going to be like.
Correct.
Oh, well, it's going to suck because I'm not going to be drunk. I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to have fun.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. And
No.
you're telling people, no. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
telling you, it's quite the opposite. You can enjoy what you're doing,
Yes.
appreciate it more, and kind of live it up to an
Right.
extent, but just
And there's
differently.
little quirky benefits too.
Okay.
Like you're not standing in line,
No,
at the
right.
concert paying $15 for a beer
Or like the
or
line
the
for the bathroom.
bathroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the big
Like
one.
no more of that. You don't have to worry
Yeah.
about driving home or paying
Right.
for an
For an Uber.
Uber.
Oh, man.
I mean, little stuff like that
Yeah.
how
It
about the
starts to
good
add up,
things?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it is funny because I'm just going to say this as like a little personal thing,
Mhm.
kind of like with, I do work in hospitality. So
Yeah.
I know one of the things, like I'm thinking in my own head, I'm like, if I totally cut out alcohol, like I love a good bottle of wine
Sure.
for dinner. Honestly, half the time we just make up what we're saying. So
Secrets
yeah,
out.
just the secret is out. Yeah, it's like, oh, what wine would go with this? You just pretty much make
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
whatever you can come up with off
Yeah.
the top of your head.
That's hilarious.
So whether or not it actually goes with the food,
Yeah.
probably just you're making that up
Yeah.
anyway. So now I'm
Yeah.
thinking about it, I'm like, oh, maybe I wouldn't have to do that.
Yeah, and
as
I'll
much.
tell you this may be a little controversial, and if you need to edit it out,
Oh,
feel
no.
free. But I'll tell you one thing that's helped me is the NA beers.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, I don't have any reason to
because
no.
all the online things that I follow, there's
Mhm.
quite a bit of hubbub around it. Some people
Yeah.
are like, that's it's great. Some people are like, that's a trigger.
Right.
For me, because like I mentioned before, it's so habitual. Like I would start
Right.
the grill, crack
Yes.
open a
Oh, that's a
beer.
big one.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like
Yeah, absolutely.
come home from work, whatever it is, whatever that trigger is, and those NA beers have really come
Well,
in
good.
very handy.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And I mean,
Yeah.
there are even, I know I've talked to people who are going through sobriety and
Mhm.
they will still partake in,
Yeah.
the gummies,
Yeah, right.
medical marijuana,
Yeah.
whatever it might
Mhm.
be. And some people, too, like if you have an issue with alcoholism, if you do have to have a pain prescription at some
Right.
point, it's very different
Yeah.
depending on what the substance is.
Sure.
From a mental health standpoint,
Mhm.
I would just go back to the subjectivity. Whatever works for you
Yeah.
works for you.
Yeah.
And again, not to make it controversial or anything. I
Right.
just, I really do think, I mean, even to that point, I don't necessarily, I'd have to, I would want to research that. Now it's got my brain. I'm like, I
Yeah.
wonder how that would actually work. But I don't think that there
Yeah.
should be too much. And if that's, again, if it works for you, it works
Right.
for you. I
Right.
mean,
And I'm not putting down like 8 of them.
right.
You know what
It's
I
just
mean?
kind
I'm
of a
having
little,
like one. It gets that habit
exactly. Yeah.
out of the way.
Kind of just makes up. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. And then you
Yeah.
just keep going,
So
or,
that's
and I think
definitely helped
too,
me.
it kind of comes down to, like you said, like firing up the grill and
Yeah.
having a beer. I mean,
Mhm.
even holding it in your hand
Exactly.
is a big thing. And having
Exactly.
that, and, and I mean, hey, if it's a resource, it's a resource. And,
Right.
it's there. And again, if I would say pay attention to what's in your mind, that we always talk
Right.
about the narrative, your inside
Sure.
voice.
Yeah.
If you are having that, and you're like, oh, well, I've already gone this far. Maybe I should get a beer. Well, no, then you
Right.
know what? That doesn't work for you.
Right.
That's that
Yeah.
subjectivity. Like,
Yeah.
no, so your personality, don't, just don't.
Yeah.
Just, maybe we should cut those out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if it's just giving you that little, like,
Yeah.
hey, you know what? Now I feel like I can keep going,
Right.
or that's not even the
It's
right way
not
of
even
saying
it.
it.
It's
No.
just that habit. I can't even explain it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just the habit, and it doesn't do any. I'm not getting a buzz from it, so
Right,
it's not
right,
doing
right,
that.
right.
It's the habit.
And and
It's
even
just a habit.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, again, I am so proud of you. I want to give another big thank you to Christina for being here today, for your bravery, your insight, and for your strength. I have enjoyed our discussions, and I wish you all the positivity I can going forward with your journey.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
having me.
No, my absolute pleasure. I also want to thank Colab Studios for their help, their resources, and their staff. And as always, I want to thank each and every listener for tuning in today. My name is Bradley Wink, and this has been an episode of What Brings You In Today. As always, if you or anyone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call or text 988, or you can go to 988lifeline.org. Someone will be there to help you. Thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.